Good evening. Tonight's video is called "A Message to Trump from a Puerto Rican." And first of all, I'm gonna start saying that I'm not an economist. I'm not a Thomas Sowell. I wasn't. I didn't graduate from Harvard. I actually graduated from the University of Puerto Rico. And yes, we are. Since we are a U.S. territory, we fall under the federal education system. So I do have a degree on something useful. I didn't study basket weaving, underwater basket weaving, or something like that. However, my degree is in uh, e- like engineering technology. I have a STEM degree. Uh, for all intents and purposes, I am a scientist, and this scientist never actually did anything with his degree that he acquired from the University of Puerto Rico because I joined the military. However, I do know, or I am able to understand basic things. And I understand that our president, because Puerto Rico is a U.S. territory, as I mentioned, he is trying to bring uh, industries back into the U.S., industries that we have lost over decades of neglect, pretty much of wanting to uh, serve a globalist idea. And so I know that he wants to bring manufacturing back, right? And all the things that he's currently doing with the economy is with that in mind to hopefully get those companies that left and moved to India or China or Vietnam or whatever to bring them back to the nation. Now, uh, hopefully, it will all work, right? But we need to have a productive society, right? And the reason why I decided to make this video is precisely because if we are going to bring production back into the nation, we need to have productive people. But currently, we have all sorts of programs that make people not want to be productive. I know this is not a thing that I discovered, as I said, but for all intents and purposes, I'm a nobody. I have a science degree, something in STEM, right? I'm not an economist. Again, I'm not like uh, Milei in Argentina. He is an economist expert who also happens to be the president. I'm just a retired military member who happens to have a degree in STEM. But we all know, this is basic knowledge, that there are certain things that make people not want to work. Things like, for example, providing people with food. If you only provide this services, by the way, I'm also not completely against uh, welfare programs as long as these programs are only given to very specific groups such as the elderly. If you are 68 and older, I don't see any problem with you receiving EBT or the SNAP program, for you to eat, right? If you're 68, if you're 65, yes, I do understand that at that age you can retire with Social Security. But I would say keep working for a few more years, or just work with what you're receiving from Social Security, wait for 3 more years, and then you will be eligible for SNAP, this so-called EBT program. If you are someone with a handicap, but it has to be like a really bad handicap. Like, for example, if you're blind, you can receive these programs. I'm just using the whole EBT thing as an example, but I'm gonna keep providing other examples, right? If you're blind, if you are paralyzed from the neck down, if you are on a wheelchair but you can still move from the waist up, depending on your mobility, you can still receive all the benefits. If you are completely capable of operating your upper body and your only problem is with your legs, and so you're in a wheelchair but you're perfectly capable from the upper body, then I'd say maybe you get half the benefits that someone else that is seriously handicapped would get, right? So again, I'm not against welfare. I'm just against having people that are perfectly capable of being productive in society. I'm against them receiving these programs because this incentivizes them not to want to do anything, because they're like, well, I mean, I can live by with these programs and I don't have to do anything. Then bringing all production back, all these companies back to the nation is going to be like, okay, so who's going to do it? And then at that point, we're going to start thinking like Europeans have been thinking, and they're going to be like, or people in government in the nation, in our nation, are going to start thinking like, well, since people don't want to work, we got to import workers. And no, we don't have to import workers. That's why we got to restrict all these benefits that we're giving people that could be productive but decide not to be, because big daddy government is there to provide, right? Currently, right? So if you have people that are hungry, they feel the hunger, that weird sensation that we hate to feel, and then you start feeling weak, and you get angry, you may get a headache, you're going to start thinking about doing something. Like, hopefully you're going to start thinking about being productive, depending on your how you were raised. I would hope that you would start thinking about becoming productive to society and start working. But I do understand that some people will decide to go for crime, right? But I would hope that our society hasn't deteriorated to the level where most people will decide to go into crime, and they will have high moral values and decide to work in order to feed themselves. Again, I'm using the whole EBT SNAP thing as an example, but we have other examples like Section 8 or government housing. I'm going to give you, I'm going to tell whoever is listening to this, who chances are is probably not going to be from Puerto Rico because I'm making this video in English, that in Puerto Rico, we have generations of families that practically inherit. Obviously, they don't really inherit, but practically for all intents and purposes, they inherit the public housing that someone before them had, as in like their mom was in public housing. Now the son or daughter of this person who passed away inherited it, because this is another person that decides not to be productive. not to be a productive member of society. So there's people that they just decide I'm not gonna do anything because, as I said, Big Daddy is going to give me a roof over my head where I may pay, I don't know, like $1. I've heard stories like that. I don't know if this is true. Maybe I'm wrong, but like ridiculous amounts of money for being able to stay in uh, government housing, right? uh, and they're gonna be well fed because they're gonna get SNAP or EBT, whatever you want to call it. But then not only that, you you also provide them with Medicare, or sorry, Medicaid, because you do have to pay to have Medicare. I'm perfectly fine way, but Medicaid, you also provide people that decide not to work to receive Medicaid. So now they're able to eat, they have a place to stay, and they have their health care all covered by Big Daddy government. So if you are giving me all these things that are the basic things that people need to be able to live a decent, healthy life, then why do I need to work? You understand? And in Puerto Rico, we have a lot of people that are in these government programs. Uh, I just looked up the percentage of Puerto Ricans receiving food stamps is actually 42%. That's an amount of people that receive this government welfare program. 42%. Now, those 42%, but that doesn't mean, however, that there's 42% of people that are unemployed. Allegedly, on my search, unemployment in Puerto Rico, and I say allegedly, I just gotta base my comments on what I found is around 5.5, 5.6 people. Sorry, percentage of the population in Puerto Rico that are unemployed. However, you still have 42% of people receiving food stamps. Maybe these people are actually employed. Maybe maybe all they care about having is a part-time job. Because, as I said, since there's Big Daddy government there to help them, they figure, well, in order for me to get by and have some cash in my pocket, all I gotta do is a part-time job. So I'm technically employed, but uh, I'm not a full-time employee because I choose not to be, right? And that's not something we can have if we want to bring production, manufacturing back to the nation. If we want to bring all these uh, companies that left the nation and moved elsewhere back into the nation, if we want to bring people back into working status. And so I have mentioned a few of these programs, the whole SNAP, EBT, section. I mentioned Medicaid, right? And there's more, but I'm just gonna mention those. So because essentially everything else that I mentioned would be redundant. This is the point of the video that I'm trying to get to, where uh, these programs are a problem. But not only these programs are a problem, we also have the problem of uh, forcing private private the private industry to pay a minimum wage, forced by local governments or federal government, or federal government. And we have to end this. We have to allow the free market to dictate what someone's uh, job is worth based on uh, demand and offer. If what you are is in high demand, chances are your job is still going to be worth a lot of money. If not, then you're going to see a reduction in your earnings because your job is not really necessary. There's not a large necessity of what you do. We also, I don't know how this would work, but talking about like essential jobs, somehow I know that you are trying to get rid of the federal education system. Somehow we have to. I also know that the federal government sends money to universities, and these are private universities, along with state universities. We have to somehow reduce the amount of money, if not stop all the money that is being sent to universities that provides jobs or uh, education in quotation of programs that are really worth nothing, like uh, gender studies, stuff like that. uh, that is worthless. And I know in uh, 2020, a bunch of companies started hiring people for those positions because they wanted to look progressive. But then, obviously, the economy has gotten has deteriorated. They have decided to straight up get rid of these people because these people bring nothing to whichever company they were hired. This is there is no value on having a quote unquote education on programs such as gender studies. So if a university decides to keep such programs, well, they'll see a reduction in federal funding or a, a stop altogether in what they get. Because we need people to study something like what I studied, although I never did anything with it because, as I said, I joined the military, right? And now that I bring back the whole military thing, uh, you know, I, I'm a firm believer that every nation has to have uh, the most powerful military they can have based on you know uh, the economy of that nation. So obviously there will be nations with more powerful militaries than others, right? But I'm not gonna get into like what things should the military get involved in. No, this whole video is about being productive, right? So one of the things that I notice about the military is that is is basically based on having someone in a spot where we need a certain someone. Now, does that mean that that individual that was sent to that spot is gonna be useful? Is gonna be productive for that spot that that person was sent to? Not necessarily. Sometimes it is the case. I've actually, in my military career, I met various individuals who were straight up badasses. I'm not saying badasses in the sense that like they're like ending people's lives, like a badass. No, I'm saying like these are smart people. They get their job super quickly, and They become badasses. And then there are other people like myself that succeed in certain jobs after having been in that certain job for a couple of years. And there are other people that are straight up not meant to be doing a certain job, and they should be allowed to move to something else that they choose, you know, because otherwise, why do we have this someone that is not being productive, right? And it's not that they're not, uh, it's not that they're lazy. It's not like that. It's just that what they're doing currently is not something that clicks with them, and maybe they could be better used on something else. Maybe if someone has a background education on something, maybe send those people into a job that actually fits whatever they studied. And the military is full of all kinds of jobs, from the enlisted level to the office, right? So if we want to be productive, why don't we focus on that, moving people to where they should be, and not where we want to have someone because there's space there, right? In addition to that, right? Like sometimes there's people in the military that are capable of doing all kinds of things, pretty much everything, anything you give them, they can do. But maybe they have a little something. I don't know. This is just a random example, right? But it could be something like while they were in the military, they suffered an injury to where they can no longer fully bend their knee, but they're still quite capable of carrying heavy load and doing technical, mental level work. They can still pass their physical, and by the physical I mean like the running, the push-ups, the sit-ups, all that stuff. They can still pass that. In this example that I'm bringing, they can't fully bend their knee. Why don't we, instead of deciding to separating them from the military, why don't we keep them? Because we already have them. And currently the military needs a lot of people, because not a lot of people wants to join, number one. And number two, not everyone can join because of various reasons, which is why only 1% of the population in the military, and that has been the case for decades, right? So why don't we think about those things? Keep what we have, which is capable of doing all kinds of things. But hey, if right now their job requires them to be in a certain position, I don't know, like maybe they gotta shoot from the kneeling position. Maybe they can't be one of those people that is in infantry or whatever, but they can do all kinds of other things. I don't know. I'm just saying. And going back to the minimum wage thing, so not only does the minimum wage the the whole concept of the free market, and also obviously affects how companies are able to hire, because they also gotta I mean, the purpose of having a business is to make money, and sometimes these people are not even like uh, greedy. They maybe make a very small earning, but that is enough. And if you force them to pay a minimum wage that may get them to start cutting hours, start reducing employees. How is that productive? But not only that, as the good Thomas Sowell said, and Walter Williams, and also I believe I forgot his name, but anyways, uh, great thinkers, uh, great economists, as they realized minimum wage affects people that lack skills but are still capable of being productive. Because now, since you're forcing me, say I own a business, I gotta pay a forced amount per hour. Now I'm just going to want to get whichever is worth it the most for my business, as opposed to me saying, well, I know that you are not as skilled, but I still can use you on other things. Also goes back to, the whole military thing, having people that have been put into certain positions. Maybe they're not good for that position, but they can still be useful on something else, right? Well, when it comes to the whole minimum wage thing, you are affecting people that are less skilled but can still be productive, right? And so um, I think I basically covered everything I wanted to cover. The only thing that I'm not actually gonna finish with is the following. Uh, we need to have a a nation that is financially stable. And part of being financially stable is having productive people doing work. But on top of that, we also need something else, because I mentioned all those previous welfare programs that, as I said, can remain, but only given to certain specific groups. There is a group that I didn't mention, but Puerto Ricans, Puerto Rican, although I don't fall under that group, because I don't receive any of these programs, right? But in Puerto Rico, as I mentioned, we are a U.S. territory. Guam is a U.S. territory as well, right? But U.S. territories, because of no taxation without representation, don't get taxed federal income tax. And by the way, this person who is talking to you right now is a right wing libertarian. So I believe that taxation is theft, right? As I mentioned earlier, that I'm a big uh, defender of the the free market. I like to listen to people like Thomas Sowell, Walter Williams, people like that, right? Uh, and I believe that taxation is theft, but obviously we have to have a government, because we are not. I forgot the name of these people that are completely against government. Government. No, libertarians do believe that we have to have a government, but a small government. And I know that uh, your government, because this message is for Trump, is actually reducing government. You know, employees, uh, reducing uh, different branches of the government, like USAID, things that are uh, worthless, right? But if we are to have a government, because we have to, obviously there's got to be people paying into the government, hopefully the least amount possible, but they still have to be paying into it in order to receive the benefits, right? But in Puerto Rico, people don't pay into the federal income tax, again because of the no taxation without representation, because they don't pay federal income tax. They also don't have, and Guam also don't have a representation in Congress, the Senate. They, they don't get to vote for the president, but they still receive federal funding in all kinds of federal programs that are paid for by uh, uh, the people of the nation who actually pay federal income tax. So how is that fair? How is it fair that these people who are, and again, I believe taxation is theft, but we do have to have a government. How are we sending other people's money, money that they worked for and they should have kept in their pocket, at least most of it? How are we sending that money to these places where people are not paying into the programs? So, in my opinion, the right thing to do, because obviously the whole taxation without representation, is make them a state. Make them a state, but having reduced all these federal social welfare programs and having created a productive mindset, by eliminating, this aid that is given to people so that they feel like they don't have to do anything, or by forcing private business into paying people not for what their work is worth and what they're capable of doing. Because obviously at work you can have two individuals that are capable of doing the work, but one is better than the other. That someone should also, be paid more. And if we're not forcing people, or sorry, if we're not forcing a certain amount of money to be paid, people are going to strive to be the best and earn what they feel like they are worth, right? And by doing this, even if you have states or new states, because for intents and purposes, more than likely, Puerto Rico, under the current circumstances, with all this welfare and with all this, you know, government protections, such as a minimum wage, chances are, very likely, I'm going to give it a 99.9%, the likelihood of Puerto Rico becoming a Democrat state exists. Obviously, me being right-leaning, I obviously don't want another Democrat state. But if we change the way we do things, maybe even Democrats can change the way they think, and instead of living off of other people's money, other productive people, maybe we'll go back to the way things used to be, where the differences between the Republican Party and the Democratic Party were based on what we feel we should do globally, you know, in our global militaristic interventions or whatever, and maybe we can leave back this whole uh, mindset of just being worthless, but being taken care by somebody else. I don't think I got anything else to say. By the way, if your government doesn't decide to uh, make Puerto Rico a state, at least uh, stop sending all this federal aid paid for by the people that are actually paying into the programs. Just stop sending it altogether. And maybe at that point in time, uh, they will realize that they should stop having this socialistic mindset, and or maybe they'll want independence, or just straight up give them independence, both to Guam and you know, Puerto Rico, and stop sending other people's money to where people are not paying into the system. Uh, but as I said, there's also the option of making them a state, and at which point, you know, with all these things that I have mentioned, getting rid of all these things, you know, maybe they're gonna be uh, a, another uh, pair of states. I mean, I don't know if Guam would become a state or become part of Hawaii, seeing as how Guam is so small, but uh, they'll be part of the union as productive members of the nation, and not be like California, Illinois, New York, and places like that. And I believe that's all I had to say. Sorry that this video was so long. Anyways, if you learned something from this video, uh, or if I made you think, I would hope that you share it. Thanks for listening on until the next video. Bye for now.